already into bug bounties, how are they performing, what are the particular skill set that is required to start with bug bounties, and we discussed about so much. In the second session, we started with HTML injection and we discussed about XSS, so that to increase the severity of injection attack if you get HTML injection, we also recommended to test for XSS on the very same place, so that to see not only the HTML tags are vulnerable or injectable, but also the JavaScript, which will give you a lot more severity and impact than the HTML injection. So these were the topic that we discussed. So for today's talk, the different types of XSS we are going to cover. We have already covered the reflected XSS. Today we are going to start with stored XSS and DOM based XSS. And also we have a plan to teach you about SQL injection. So these all are the topics that we are going to cover into today's talk. So I will hand over this session to again Rohit, so that he can start with stored and DOM XSS, and I'll come at the end to talk more on SQL injection. I hope it's clear now.
Thank you so much, Shifa, for that useful insights. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen, and we're going to start with XSS. We have already covered reflected XSS, so we'll move ahead to stored XSS, and then we'll also see what is DOM XSS. So you can just acknowledge me if my screen is visible.
Yes, Rohit, it's visible.
Great, thank you. All right, so here, let me just quit this. Okay. So now what we are going to do is stored XSS. So what happens in stored XSS? So if you guys can recall, in the previous session, we discussed about reflected XSS, and we also discussed about the two conditions that should fulfill in order to confirm that we have identified a reflected XSS vulnerability. What were the two conditions, guys? If you guys can recall, let me see if you can recall in the chat box. The first one was reflection. Yes. And the second one was, can anyone tell me? Execution. Very good. Ninja. Nice. So the first one was reflection and the second one is execution. If both these conditions satisfy, then we can confirm, yes, we have identified a reflected XSS. So what will change in stored XSS? Now, there will be no reflection to what we saw in reflected XSS. Instead, our payload should get stored onto a web server. Okay. So first condition is it should get stored onto the web server, and second condition is that there should be an execution. Obviously, if our JavaScript is executed, then and only then we can confirm that it is execution. Okay, so the condition over here is it should get stored and it should also get executed. All right, so we know now that we should identify such forms where you can save your data. So every one of you must be aware about the very simple basic functionality that comes in all the application is saving your profile details, right? So let's assume, let me go to your profile, and here I can see there is a form which collects my details: first name, last name, credit card number, phone number, address. And you guys know that when we save our data over there, it gets stored onto the server. So this can be a potential injection point for me to identify stored XSS. I hope this is super simple and everyone is clear. Please acknowledge me, guys. Everyone is clear about how you are going to approach it. You have to first identify any forms that can save your data. Okay, not only forms like, yeah, I can see a lot of yeses. That is great. So thank you so much, guys, for being such so much interactive. That's great. So not only forms like this, that is my profile. There could be other forms wherein you can save your data. For example, comment boxes. Okay, so I can comment on a website wherein there will be some data saved onto that specific website into the database. Okay, so you just have to keep in one mind. Yeah, someone also suggested contact page. There is one more page, that is feedback page. Okay, So basically anything that stores your data onto the server is a potential injection point or an entry point for you to identify stored XSS. This is absolutely clear with everyone. So now what we are going to do is, once we have identified an input page like this, we are going to input our simple payload. Okay, so I'm going to input a simple payload that is script alert one script tag close, similar to this in the next field here and here. But guys, we need to make sure that this is a good practice whenever you're testing for stored XSS. As here, I have pasted the same payload in all the fields. If it gets executed, I would not know which field was vulnerable and due to which I have got the XSS. So just make a good habit. Then in all the fields, you change the payload at least the alert 1, alert 2, alert 3. Okay, so this way I will know which field is vulnerable. Okay, so now I'm going to save my data into the web application. So I'm going to hit on update. So once I hit on update, you guys can see I got alert 1, which was our first name field or name field over here. Okay, which means this is definitely vulnerable. All right, let's log out. Let's again go to your profile. Let's log in into the application, and you guys can see when I log in into the application, something happened. What has happened over here? My JavaScript payload, which was stored into the web server, was fetched and executed. Hence, we are able to see alert over here. So this is basically JavaScript execution that has been done. Hence, we can confirm we have identified stored XSS. Now you may think we just stored it into our profile. How it is dangerous? Okay, so I'm going to tell you two scenarios in which you can understand the severity and impact of stored XSS. So the first scenario is facebook.com. So let's assume facebook.com. Okay, in facebook.com we can upload pictures. Script alert, okay sir, script tag close. Nice. So facebook.com, we can upload pictures over there, post. So let's say I upload a post over there, and in the description I type or I give a payload through which I can steal cookies of users, and I upload that particular picture. Now anyone who comes and visits that post of mine, maybe to like or comment, there will be XSS execution happening onto their screens, and hence I will be able to steal their cookies, right? So I just have to save my payload once, and I can abuse that to steal cookies of multiple users. Okay, so I can do a lot of ATOs, account takeovers in that case. This was the first case. Second test case is, so we generally, as I was working in banks, I have worked with a couple of banks into their information security team. So there is a functionality called as maker and checker. So what happens is, let me give you a very simple example. Let's assume I am a user, and me as a user is going to apply for credit card. Okay, so let's say when I apply for credit card, my application, I have to submit my documents, fill all my correct details and stuff. Then it reaches to the person from the bank. So let's assume the bank is X bank. Okay, so X bank will reach that document or the details, profile details. Let's assume it is vulnerable to XSS. Then I would be able to steal the cookie of maker. Maker is the first person who verifies the data that has come in the backend just to verify the credit card application. And if everything is correct, then the maker will send that credit card application to a higher authority, that is checker, who will then verify if everything is correct or no. So maker approves, I'm able to steal the maker's cookie. Maker sends that form and says everything is correct to checker. It again gets executed. The JavaScript payload again gets executed, and I'm able to steal the cookie of checker as well. So what I have done over here is privilege escalation. I have moved my privileges from lower access to higher and then more higher. So what I have done over here is I have done vertical privilege escalation with the help of XSS. Okay, I'm able to steal the cookies of maker, checker, both. I'm able to log in using their accounts, and I can basically do a lot of things because I have now more functionalities and access into the application through which I'm able to perform activities which can create more impact. Okay. I hope you guys understood what is stored XSS in this case. Okay. Now let's move ahead to DOM XSS. I have seen a lot of people getting confused in DOM XSS, maybe because generally DOM XSS is not identified very quickly in the wild on web applications. Okay. This is because of the intrinsic quality of DOM XSS, that we have to read the JavaScript code and understand what is the vulnerable source and sink provided. Okay, hence a lot of people just avoid DOM XSS, but it is really a dangerous vulnerability. Why and how, or what makes DOM XSS different from reflected and stored? So DOM XSS is a client side vulnerability. Now, what do I mean by client side vulnerability? So everything that is going to happen, the attack is going to be on the browser, okay, onto the client's computer. Now, in that case, the server is not aware what is happening onto the client's computer. Hence, this attack becomes more dangerous. So let's say there's a banking application, bank.com is vulnerable to DOM XSS. In that case, I'm able to steal the cookies of another user. Let's assume Shifa in this case. I'm able to steal her cookies. I can do an account takeover, and the server will also not make a log of that there was a JavaScript execution done onto a client side. Okay, because everything that happens is into the client or the browser's DOM. Okay, so this looks a little bit different as well as dangerous. So let's understand how can we do DOM XSS and what is the approach to it. Okay, so I have created a lab over here. So this is a DOM XSS lab, which is hello. Now, first thing that you need to do in DOM XSS is to try to understand the JavaScript code from the source. And you have to see that whatever input has been given into the source comes out of the sink as it is, without getting modified, without getting filtered, or without getting sanitized. Okay, then you can confirm that, yeah, there is a DOM XSS vulnerability present over there. All right. So what we are going to do over here is, this is a test page. I'm going to right click over here and I'm going to go and inspect. Okay, just see what are the steps that we do. Okay, I'll go to sources. So when I go to sources and click on DOM XSS test cases, I can see the simple HTML page, nothing fancy over here. But I can see from here that there is a script source. This HTML page is trying to load a JavaScript code from a specific source, which is dom.js. Okay, so let's see what is dom.js. So I can see this is dom.js, which has been called, okay, in this particular page. All right, so here we can see there are three different test cases for document.sync, document.sync, and document.sync. So let's see quickly one test case from here. So let's see the third test case. Okay, so we can see over here, you guys have to always remember, this is a cool tip that you guys can follow to quickly identify DOM XSS. You just need to remember some of the very most famous and vulnerable sinks: document.inner HTML or document.location.writeln, okay, document.href, location.href. These are some of the vulnerable sinks and most famous ones. You just have to put in your input into the source and see if it comes out of the sink as it is without getting modified. Let's see what does that mean over here. So here we can see an execution sink. Here you can see three variables: Bitcoin, ETH, and Dogecoin. So here we can see that there's a variable market, there's a variable coin which has been assigned, and we can see coin over there. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to add coin over here and I'm going to hit enter. All right, so I can see there are three coins, which is BTC, ETH, and Dogecoin. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to say coin equals to BTC. So when I do that, I can see the current hyped coin price is $40,000. Okay, so I can see the price of BTC from here, which has been taken from this specific variable. Similarly, I modified this to ETH. I can see the price of ETH, and the last one is Dogecoin. All right, this was very simple. But what will happen when in the parameter coin, I'm not giving the input as BTC. Okay, let's give BTC and let's see what if I give a input, which is a JavaScript payload. Let's see how the application behaves. So I'm going to say image source equals to X on error equals to confirm 1. Okay, I'll just copy this. Now, just to show you what happens in slow motion, I'm going to add breakpoints to understand how the code is being interpreted and how it is being executed. So we'll pause the script execution and we'll resume it step by step so you guys can understand what actually happens in the background. Okay, so I'm going to add certain breakpoints over here. Okay, so I've added multiple breakpoints as you can see on your right hand side. Now I'm going to hit enter over here. So the page will start loading. It will not load, as you can see, it is continuously loading. It will not complete until and unless I resume the script execution. So I'll just take my cursor over here and I'll do resume script execution just to show you what is happening actually, how my payload is reaching to the sink. So I'll just do resume script execution and you guys can see it. It came from BTC to ETH. Okay, the script is executing over here. Okay, so let's move to the next one. I'll again do script resume execution. Okay, I'll do once more. Okay, so I'll hover over here onto coin. So we can see our payload has not yet reached over here. So let's do resume execution. Now let's verify. So we can see over here that my payload reaches to the sink as it is without getting modified, sanitized or filtered. As you can see over here. Now it should come out from here as it is. So let's resume the script execution and we can see over here the XSS occurs. Now you may be thinking, sir, how is this different from reflected XSS? This is different from reflected XSS because I cannot see any reflection in the page source or anywhere. Okay, so you just need to keep in mind it may look similar to reflected XSS because we are identifying a parameter into the URL, putting our payload, but this is not reflected XSS. Everything is happening into the browser's DOM. Okay, I hope you guys understood this scenario. Everyone is clear with me? Everyone is able to understand? Is this lab available in GitHub? No, this lab is not available, but if you want, I can share this lab. I can upload it on GitHub and I can share with you guys. Why did I use image source? So it was just a random payload. I could have used any payload that I want. Okay. Here, just an example, I used this specific payload. Okay. That's awesome. Everyone is able to understand. That's great. Please repeat the DOM based exercise, how to practice DOM lab. Okay, so I'll just do it once more quickly. Okay, let's do a quick overview once again. So let's again see what is DOM XSS. Okay, so DOM XSS is document object model XSS type, which happens in the client's browser. It is not a server-side vulnerability, which means the payload never reaches to the server. Everything happens onto the client side, which is on the browser. Okay, hence it is dangerous. Now I'll just right click and click on inspect. You always have to remember for exploiting DOM-based XSS, you need to pass your input through the source and it should come out of the sink. Always remember, guys, whenever you're asked by an interviewer as well, DOM XSS, you need to mention these two things. The first is the payload should go into the input, that is the source. It should come out of the sink as it is. Okay. And this is a client-side vulnerability which happens in the browser's DOM. Okay. Okay, so here you can see I have added breakpoints over here. So let's see let's see another example this time. So name. Okay, let's do that. I'll just remove all this breakpoints. Perfect. Let me just reload this. Okay. So now what we are going to do is, let's see the first example this time. So you can see there's a variable assigned username and we can see over here, search params dot get name. Okay, so let me just say here name. Okay, and hit enter. So you can see I have written over here hello hacker, and then whatever the input has been given, if the input is null, okay, not equals to null, then it is basically going to print something like this. So let's say we give an input to name. So let's say name equals to Rohit and hit enter. And you can see hello hacker Rohit. This is what is being printed. And this is the expected result that we wanted to see. Now, as dot inner HTML document dot get element by ID dot inner HTML. This is one of the sink from where my input comes out. I'm just going to check if there is an additional mitigation for my input to get sanitized or modified. Okay, but so for that I'm going to verify. So first, just to verify, I can put special characters. So I'm going to put these special characters. Okay, and I'm going to add breakpoints again for you guys so that you guys can understand what is happening. Let's try to reload this. Okay, let me just try to hit enter once more. Okay, so let's see if it reached to the sink. Let's resume this script execution. Okay, so it reached to my sink as it is. It is not getting encoded, sanitized, anything. Okay, so this gives me an indication that there could be a possibility that it is not going to encode my payload, and it is going to execute it as it is. Okay, so here again I can input my payload that I want. So I'm going to use this payload image source equals to X on error, or SVG payload, or any payload. Okay, feel free to use any payload over there. It should work. So let's verify. Yes, it has reached the sink as it is that we were expecting, and it is going to get executed. And here also we can see in the username, it has reached as it is. So it will give us a script execution. So you guys can confirm from here that, yeah, this target is vulnerable to DOM XSS and we are able to exploit it. Okay, I hope you guys understood this. Everyone? Okay, there's no reflection into the page source. So if you're testing DOM XSS based on reflections into the page source, that is an incorrect way. I personally feel that a lot of people tested this way, which is incorrect. You do not have to see reflections in page source to confirm it as a DOM XSS. I don't know, people maybe get confused in both these vulnerabilities, so don't get confused in that specific manner. Okay, always keep this in these thing in mind whenever you're testing for DOM XSS. Everyone is clear? Everyone is with me, able to understand what we are doing right now? Yes. Awesome. That's great. Great. So we have 106 participants. That's awesome. Please repeat the last part. So the last part I said is do not check DOM XSS based on reflections. I see a lot of people. So I have asked people, how do you approach for DOM XSS? So they tell me, I check for parameters. I try to input my payload, and then I go and see the reflections into the page source. There is an incorrect way to check DOM XSS. Okay, you will not see reflections into the page source if you're testing it that way. Obviously, your JavaScript payload is going to be into the DOM of the browser. Okay, and we have to look for JS files. Okay. Now someone asked how it can be more dangerous. So you can apply the same concepts that you're going to apply in reflected or stored XSS. So you can steal cookies from DOM XSS. We already saw a cookie grabber payload in our first session, through which we were able to steal a cookie of user. Okay, you can apply the same payload over here and steal the cookie of a user, and you can compromise his whole account. This will be an ATO, which is account takeover vulnerability for that specific website and that specific user. Okay, how to prevent? So to prevent this vulnerability, it is very simple. Whatever input has been provided into the source should directly not come out of the sink as it is. It should get sanitized, or it should get encoded. Basically, break the context of JavaScript execution while coming out from the sink. Okay, developer can put any mitigations that he want. Generally, we tell to do HTML encoding because it is one of the most safest way to mitigate this. But I see a lot of developers doing blacklisting or whitelisting of filters or blocking out by strict rejects. But that is again, there is no certainty or there are chances that it can be bypassed. Okay, so blacklisting filters and putting strict rejects sometimes can be bypassed. Okay, so that should be kept in mind. Okay. Can it work on live chat support? So in live chat support, it would definitely depend on how the web application is being developed. Okay, if there is a chatbot, if there's a chatbot, in that case, you need to see how the code is being executed. You have to basically check if the code is on the client side of how it is behaving. If I'm using a third-party chatbot, then obviously it will not be vulnerable. But in chatbots, you can check for blind accesses. You can input your payload. The payload will get stored into the backend database. And whenever the support agent or the customer care or admin, whoever is going to check those tickets, that payload will get executed. Okay, and you will get a hit onto your server. We have a restriction of time right now. So you guys can explore what is XSS Hunter. We use XSS Hunter. It is a truly awesome service, a free service which can be used to explore and do blind XSS attacks. Okay, a lot of people again misses to check for blind XSS, but definitely you should check for blind XSS bugs as well. It may not get executed whenever you're testing. It may take 1 week, 2 weeks, 6 months, 1 year. Whenever someone from the back end, from the other side of the screen, that is the web target, interacts with your payload, at that time the script execution will happen and you will get and hit onto your application and will confirm that it was being executed. Okay, with one last thing I want to mention is with XSS you can do a lot of things. Okay, there are multiple things that you can do to increase the impact. Take screenshots of the window. You can also key log strokes. So whenever we type, we can run a keylogger and you will be able to steal what the user is typing. You can redirect the user from malicious website from here to an attacker control domain, and you can also steal cookies. Okay. All right, guys. I would like to call upon Shifa now because she also has to share some of her insights on SQL. So I would not like to take her time. So Shifa, if you could please come and share your hello.
Hi, Rohit. Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Perfectly.
Thank you. I think I don't have permission to share my screen, Rohit.
Just a second.
Yes, now I have.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rohit. Is my screen visible?
Visible.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much everyone for the acknowledgement. So today I am more interested in talking about SQL injection. SQL, before going on that, I already mentioned that the knowledge partner for creating this workshops is NCIIPC and ISAC. We are doing this for Indian Army. So the topic for today's discussion is SQL. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. Does anyone have heard about this SQL before? I'll just quickly go to the chat and see if yes, then we can fast forward a bit. Yes, oh my god, that's great. I think every one of you knows about SQL. That's so cool. Okay. So I'll just quickly give you a refresher about SQL. So SQL is structured query language, which is a language which is used to communicate to the database. Database only knows one language, that is SQL. So what is a data? If I'm talking about a database, so firstly we need to understand about data. So data is collection of raw facts, which is unorganized. It can be anything. It can be text, word, number, picture, sound, video, etc. So what is information then? Information is processed data which is in the organized format. As you see into the image, that the format in which we have the data is organized. We have particular data for IT department, we have it for finance department, and we have it for others. Then how things used to work in olden days. In olden days, we didn't had some database and better structure. So we used to have it manually into our notebooks and into our diaries. I hope you all belong to the same generation from where I do. So everything we used to store it in the form of notebooks. There is no such name as manual method, but I like to call this as manual method. If you have any good name, then please suggest into the chat box. I'll come back to see that into the chat box. So before going into directly to the table, I want to show you one more thing. So earlier into our school and college days, if teacher want to find out that how many of the students are present or absent during the class, so she used to do it manually by just opening up the register and finding out that how many of them were present on a particular day, how many of them were absent on a particular day. So I feel that a lot of disadvantages were there using the manual way. The disadvantages were the first disadvantage was that the data was not organized. There was no standard format. My register would look different from the other classes teachers register, or it can be different than any other from the whole school. So everyone follow their own format, everyone had their own style of writing it, and at any time if we need that data that was not accessible, that means we need to travel to the particular place to access that data. So all these disadvantages then were filled by the spreadsheet. So here are some limitations which I talked about, that no standard format, unorganized, and human errors. Then with the invention of spreadsheets, we all were so happy because we had a organized format, as well as we got some search results as well as filters to make our work so easy. If there are 100 students in class, teacher doesn't need to write down the 100 names and do the steps. uh, just that we had spreadsheet who is going to do everything for us, and we also had some advanced filters wherein we can use and filter them. But still spreadsheet had some issues. We still use spreadsheets, but I feel that into the large organizations to store database, spreadsheet isn't the good solution. So why? Because it cannot manage large chunk of data. It has some limitation. I'm not sure how much, but it's around 10,000 records in one go. This is what you are able to write. Difficult to update data and lack of security of data. So this is why the introduction of database came into place, which is a collection of information. In database storage, everything is been stored in the form of rows and columns, that is the table. This is how your table is going to look like. You have row, you have column. This is how the structure is going to look like. That means for now I have 3 entries and I have 3 different columns. One is serial number, second is name, and third is attendance. And here is this is the form in which the things are stored into the database. And with the help of SQL, we are going to query the database whether you have this data or no. If it is, query is going to give us some output. So let's see how to create a database. To create a database, I like SQL so much because it's very similar to how we speak. It's like normal English language. If you want to create a database, just use create database, and then you have to give the name of the database. It can be anything according to your choice. So it can be employee DB. If you want to create a table, again the syntax is super simple. You have to write create table and the table name. You can give any table name. How many column you are going to enter into the table, you can specify it over here. The data type, I'm sure you would be aware about the data type, that what type of data is going to be inserted into the particular column, that you have to write it over here, as well as you have to specify the size. size, not the perfect size, but you can specify the number of characters, let's say 50. So this 50 is going to limit the user to not enter anything more than 50 characters. Let's say, I guess I have taken the example as well. So this is one table which I am trying to create. So to create a table, I am writing on SQL command, I am writing create table employee. The name of my table should be employee, which has 3 columns. One is employee ID, second is employee name, third is employee department. Here was the data type. So the employee ID should be into the integer format, which shouldn't be greater than 10 characters basically. Here I have employee name, which can be varchar, the combination of integers and characters. And here I am specifying the limit of 50. Same way for department, I am doing the same thing. So this is how I am going to create a table. And also to add entries into the table, we can use this particular command, insert into table name, in which column you want to insert in and what are the values you want to insert in. So with the help of these two queries, we can generate a table something like this. So this way you can just create the table. So in this, we are not much interested into creating the table. This was just a basic refresher. This way you can update your table, alter the table, modify, rename and delete. So these are certain queries which you can use. That means you can do CRUD operations onto the database to do certain things. You can also drop the table. We have where clause, which is some conditions. We are going to find out and see that what are this where clause and how we can use it into performing SQL injection. So here is a lab exercise which says find the name of all employees. What if you want to find out that how many names are there into the employees table? So a simple query would look something like this. Because we know the name of the column was employee underscore name, so the query will look like select employee underscore name from employees table. If you want to select the whole record, the everything from employees table, then we will use select star from employee. This is going to give us the whole employee table structure as well as the values. The second thing is list all the employees who are working into the IT department. Let's say if I want to find out that how many of the users are only working into IT department, I don't care about the employees who are working in different departments. So to find out this data, we can query the database as select star from employee. That means I want all the details of the employee where employee department equals IT. That means I want to find out where we are using and we are giving the condition that I only want to find out the employees who are working into the IT department. Make sure that you write and spell very correctly the column names, otherwise you are going to get a lot of errors. Then we have show different type of department. To find out different types of department, we use distinct keyword. That is going to give us the different entries. We are not going to get the duplicate entries. So select distinct employee department from employee table. So this is how you are going to get different results. Now I have this truth table. This truth table is of two operators. One is AND, second is OR. We are going to understand both of them because both of them are super useful to perform SQL injection. First is AND, which says that if both the conditions are false, I am going to output and give you the result as false. That means in the query, if you are putting two conditions, both of them are false, that means you are not going to get any data from the database because the query will result into false, and when you get false, you are not going to see any data into the output. And is also so strict so that if any one of the condition is true, still it is not going to allow you to enter into the database or give you the result. And is super strict. I am again repeating because this is so important. And is so strict that it will not allow you if any one of the condition is false. That means if you see any 1 0, you are not going to get the output. If both the conditions are true, then only you will be able to see the result, otherwise not. Let's go to OR and see what happens here. So on OR gate, we see if both the conditions are false, we are going to get the output as false. If any one of the condition is true, the output will be true. That means OR is so lenient, it is allowing even if you have only one condition that is true. If both the conditions are true, that means OR will happily give you the output. So this is how both these works. You have to remember. I don't know in what way you'll remember, but consider AND as a strict gate and OR as a lenient gate. This way you will be able to remember it easily. Okay, so now let's see this application. Just ignore this drawing. So here is a login page of any application. So this can be the ISAC application maybe, which has a welcome screen, and you can see two things. One is username, second is password, and two input fields wherein you are going to enter your username and your password, and you are going to click on this login button. As soon as you put both this username and password valid, then you are going to get a output, and then you will be redirected to the another page, which can be your profile and which has some information like welcome XYZ user and the other details of yours which you have entered some way. So what do you think, which gate is been used into the backend of this application so that it is only allowing us to enter into the application when both of this are true? If any one of this is true, it will not allow me to enter into the application. Am I correct? Can you guess the gate? AND gate? I'm getting so many AND gates. Okay. So I think all of you are correct, because AND gate is only the one which will restrict the user to enter into the application if he or she knows only one field of data. So yes, in the backend, AND gate has been used to do the restriction. So for all the users around the world, the application that whatever application that we use is made by a developer in such a way that the application's further processing is being done based on the data that you are going to supply into the login screen. For example, I am a user Shifa. I know one more user, that is Rohit. So when I enter my credential, let's say shifa@gmail.com, and password can be shifa123. This is not the correct password, so please do not try on any of the applications. So shifa@gmail.com and shifa123 can be the password. When I hit on login, if both these things are there into the database, only then and then application will allow me into the application, as well as it is going to show me my own profile that will have Shifa's login profile picture which I have uploaded, as well as all my data. The same application when used by Rohit will work differently. That means Rohit's credentials are being entered into the application, that is going to go into the backend database. It is going to fetch the result for Rohit. All his profile details, etc., can be fetched out, and which will be presented for him. This is how all the application works. Let me give you one more example of Swiggy. If you use any application like Swiggy, so that means when I enter in my username and password and hit on login, the correct username and password, when I hit on login, I'm going to see all my details, such as my previous orders, as well as how many Swiggy wallet money I have, where is my order I can track, and so many different activities. So how these things are maintained? These things are maintained into the database, which have actually all the information. Now let's go down. So according to me, the query that the backend is using to perform certain login will look something like this. That is, select star from student is the name of the table, where uname equals admin. Let's say I put over here admin, and into the password also I am going to put admin. So the query from backend will look something like this: select star from student where uname equals admin and upass equals admin. This will look something like this. In general, the query doesn't have anything, that means any data. It has variables, that means whatever the user is going to enter into the input fields will go and will append into the query over here. Whatever you put into username will be appended over here. Whatever you are going to put into the input of the password will go and append over here. So as from my example, I am putting admin. So both the admin will go, one admin from the username will be append over here and the password admin will come over here. So this way the query will form up. It will go into the database and check whether admin username and admin password is there. And you can also notice that the AND gate is been used. I'll write it this way so that you can see clearly. So as you can see, AND gate has been used. That means you all were correct, because AND is going to help us give the exact result. If both the conditions are true, then only you are going to see the output. If any one of the condition is false, you are not going to get the output. So now to perform SQL injection, what we are going to do is, we being an attackers or a penetration testers, we are going to test the application by putting some characters. There are different types of SQL injection. Today we are going to talk about error based SQL injection. So at the place of username, I am putting admin. At the place of password, instead of putting any password, what I am doing is, I am putting single quote or single quote 1 equals single quote start 1. I am not putting this first single quote and this last single quote. Why? Because I am assuming that this is already present by the developer. In SQL, we have this requirement to put the strings into single quotes. So this is the reason the developers already add the single quotes into the backend query, so that the user don't have to enter this quotes. So I'm assuming that the first single quote and the last single quote is already there by the developer. So what we are entering into the place of password is this payload. What this payload will be, let us go and break down this payload. Okay, so let's say that I am putting this at the place of password. Can you see this red thing? This is what I'm going to put into the password field. Let's break down this query. So uname is admin, upass is this password. Now again, uname is admin. It can be true, it can be false. I don't know about the database. So let's consider that there is no user as admin. So we'll take this as false and will be evaluated as end. Upassword is, can you see this single quote which we have added forcefully to early close the password? So this way the application will think the password is ABC, and here I have some other part of the query which needs to be executed. So ABC uh, goes into the password and it is going to give us false. Then OR will be evaluated as a operator, single quote 1 equals single quote 1. So we are putting a condition which is always true. It can be 2 equal to 2, 5 equal to 5, or anything like that. So you see that yes, both these are equal 100%. So it is going to give us as true. False and false, that means 0 and 0 is going to give us 0 from the truth table we already have seen. OR will be evaluated as OR. True will be evaluated as true. False or true, that means if any one of the condition is true or says that I am going to allow you to get into the application. So this way we have spoofed the application into thinking and giving us the output as true, so that to get into the application. I hope you understood this. I purposely skipped this line. I hope this first payload is clear with you all. If you have doubts, please post it. Uh, okay. Okay, I think some of you are able to understand, some of you are still in doubt. We'll see the practical so that you will be able to understand it clearly. There is one more thing over here which I have just left, so I'll just explain you this one as well. So here I am putting a username as admin. In the input of the first placeholder I am writing admin, and into the input of second placeholder I am writing this much. This is my another payload, which when evaluated will be considered as uname password equals abc or 1 equal to 1. But this single quote is going to give us some error, so to balance this single quote, what we are writing is this slash, what do we call it, hyphen hyphen. Okay, so this hyphen hyphen will write, because we know that in SQL, generally in any other programming language we use this double forward slash to comment the line, but in SQL we use hyphen hyphen to comment the rest of the part of the query. In Python we use hash, so every language has something unique. So for SQL we use this. That means all the other part that we have, the rest of the query will be commented, and application will think that I don't have to execute that part, the query ends here. So this way all my single quotes will be balanced and we don't have anything left to give us the error. Let's go quickly to solve the lab. This is one application. You can think this application as a banking application. This is intentionally vulnerable. Here you can see the logs. So it's saying that please go and write email ID as this and password as password. So I'll quickly go and write user@email.com, and at the place of password I am writing password, and I'll hit on login. So it says that the username and password is not correct. Now it's saying that please write password with a single quote. So I'm doing the very same thing. If you are able to see that password and one single quote that I'm adding, it can be seen from here. Now I try to log in into the application. Oops, again the error. But what you can notice over here is that it's saying that something bad has happened. That means some syntax error has occurred. This is the reason of query not being executed. So whenever you see the syntax error, that means you have to be happy, because I mentioned the name of this type of SQL injection earlier, that it is error based SQL injection. That means you are able to get the error, and we are going to use this error and balance the query in such a way to perform SQL injection. So as you can see that there is some issue which has been created over here near password. That means what we tried doing was, we inserted the password and we inserted this code. So this code was considered as a part of the query, due to which the last single quote was also present, due to which the error has occurred. So when you find out this kind of error, you have to be happy. That means your single quote is trying to early close the query. This is where you get the errors. Now what next? So here is where you are going to see the logs. They are explaining you the query properly so that you can see. The query which tried executing was select star from users. Users is the name of the table where email equals the email address that we entered, and password equals this password. And you can see this single quote extra. This is what is creating some problems for the application. Now we'll go and perform the next steps. Now we are going to use some payload instead of a password. What they are suggesting us to put is single quote space or 1 equals 1 hyphen hyphen. Why are we using this hyphen? If you would have noticed into the code window, you see what happened. Everything just blurred out. Let me just type this once again so that you can see. Into the place of password, the developer has just did 2 single quote. So now what I'm trying is, I'm trying to close the first single quote, putting a space or 1 equals 1, which is a true condition. But if I'll just execute this much, this single quote will not be balanced and it is going to give me some errors. So what I'll do is, to balance that single quote, I'm using hyphen hyphen, which is going to comment the rest of part of the query. And if I try to log in into the application, it will go inside the application, and this way you are able to bypass with the help of SQL injection. So I hope you understood this hyphen hyphen thing, which is commenting the rest part of the query. Still you have doubts? That's okay. If spaces are not allowed, you can do it without space. That's so cool. I'm happy to see that every one of you is able to understand. Let's quickly go to the second lab and perform one more SQL injection payload, which we have discussed in the beginning. It's taking long to load, maybe because my internet is slow. So what I want you guys is to try out some payloads. You can use these two payloads, as well as there are thousands of payloads which you can find online. So you can just take them up. Do not just hit them blindly. Try to see the logs console to find out what type of error the application is giving you, and then you can try for a particular payload. Okay, so now you see that we are onto the SQL lab. Let me go to my account. Here you can see it's asking for username and password. So if I write admin and admin, will it allow me? No, because it's a invalid username or password. So what we can do is, we can just write admin and we can try to bypass it with the help of what we have done so far. We'll try to close the single quote. I'll write it over here for your understanding. I'll try to close this single quote. I'll write space, or let's try this payload this time, equals single quote 1. Why the other single quote I am not closing? Because I am assuming it is already there by the developer. So I'll just paste this and try to log in. And you see that I am able to solve this lab successfully with the help of this payload. That means nothing as a password or 1 equal to 1 has helped me make the condition true. And this is how the SQL injection is performed. We are able to spoof the query, and with that spoofing the query, we are able to get into the application. Completely clear? That's great. So now how to prevent, to prevent from SQL injection, the developer uses parameterized queries and some input validations. Some of you told me, or some of the places you would have also noticed, that special characters are not allowed, or maybe they put the limitation of entering the special characters. You can only use @ or dollar or something something. So these are certain techniques which a developer used to prevent from SQL injection. Also using the parameterized queries. If you read more on parameterized queries, it is going to give you the understanding of that in parameterized queries, the parameters that we are going to enter, the user input, is not directly entered into the query is been executed and it waits for the user input, and that is processed differently. So this is how they try to block or safeguard the application from from SQL injection. I hope it's clear. I think we are already up with the time. Yes, in the next session, we are going to talk more on SQL map, which is an automated way of finding out SQL, but understanding the manual method is always useful. That always helps you understand better. Blindly running any tool will not lend you or make you understand about the fundamentals. So this is the reason I always prefer to start manually and then you can just go and do the automated stuff when you have complete understanding about every topic. Yes, I am there on LinkedIn. You can search for Shifa Cyclewala and you'll find my profile. uh, I hope you all are able to understand, and I can stop sharing the screen. Okay, Rohit, if you are here, you would like to end this session.
Yes. So, thank you so much, first of all, Shifa, for those wonderful insights that you have shared on SQL injection. I really enjoyed it to understand what are the basic fundamentals of how SQL injection works. Everyone should first understand the truth table and how, whenever you try to put a query, how it has been passed by the backend parser. So that was very, very interesting. And yes, in the upcoming session, we are going to see how you can automate this process with the help of SQL map and how you can utilize it effectively. Having said that, once again, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you so much, Shifa, for wonderful insights and sharing this information regarding SQL injection. And thank you all for joining. We'll once again join in the upcoming session coming up next week. Till then, take care and stay safe, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you